The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Good morning and welcome to Autism Live and to Ask Dr. Doreen. So thrilled to be back here with you. I'm Shannon Penrod. And as you can see, we have the fabulous, I got to go the other way. Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is here with us. She's going to be answering your questions throughout the next hour. We are live. It is Wednesday. I got to check the date. It is June 16th, 2021. And we're so excited to be back. We've been off of live shows for a few days now, and I always miss it. I miss being here with you guys live. I want to let you know that if you're watching us live, you can be interacting with me and better yet with Dr. Grand-Pichet right now. We're live right now on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, on our homepage, Autism Live, and about 10, 12, 13 other places as well. But I'll tell you, if you want to get your question read, the quickest, easiest way to do it live is to write into us now on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Those interact, you just write in on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, and it shows up right here in our stream so that we can, both Dr. Grand-Pichet and I can see the comments. I will tell you that we have people who have written in questions throughout the last week and throughout the night on our home site, which is autism-live.com. And we usually start out with some of those questions, but, and you can be writing those in. It's just that if you do it beforehand, good evening, Nasser, so thrilled that you're here. If you do it beforehand, I usually get to one or two questions at the top of the show. We also have our entire library of videos. We are now in our 10th year of doing Autism Live. So our library of videos are available to you on autism-live.com and also on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/autismlive. And you can go back through old videos and see, the whole library of what we've done in the past. I do want to let you know that if you want to watch us recorded, we are also available as a podcast. In fact, we are the #1 rated autism podcast worldwide. We are available as a free download wherever you get your podcasts. We're saying hello to John Curtis, who's saying hello to me and to Dr. Doreen. Dr. Doreen, we're so thrilled that you are here. For those of you who don't know Dr. Doreen, she is a true expert in the field of autism. She's the founder of the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. She is also the founder of a wonderful charity, Autism Care Today. She's been working in this field far more than her skin would let you know. And has worked with individuals as young as babies and up through senior citizens. One of the things that we particularly love about her is that she sees individuals on the autism spectrum as full and total people, as individuals, and sees the family as an individual unit and helps to support all of those people. She also sees around corners. I think that she has a little bit of that, she can see things before they come on the horizon and other people can see them. So good morning, Dr. Grand-Pichet.
Good morning, Shannon. It's always lovely to be back and doing the show with you. So very nice, excited to answer some questions, and good morning to all of our viewers.
It is always my thrill and my privilege to be here with you. So I've missed you. Our first question this morning comes to us from a BCBA who says, I frequently watch your show. I was listening to Dr. Doreen speak on the June 9th show regarding the possible link between toxins, the redox reaction, and autism. And they said, if I understood correctly, the toxins prevent the respiratory cycle from functioning optimally. Is that the case? If that is the case, would a hyperbaric chamber be an effective method to assist individuals on the spectrum? And they said, thank you for a great and informative show. Thank you for writing in. We love our BCBAs.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I love the fact, Shannon, that some of our BCBAs are beginning to go down that journey that I think I went down maybe 20 somewhat years ago, right? Which is like starting to understand that we have to learn more than just how to manage behavior, and we have to understand really kind of the underlying causes and the biology a little bit better. So I love it when our BCBAs ask questions like that. So to answer that question, first, I want to refer this BCBA, and hopefully they will watch our show and know that there is, I funded a series of talks that will be happening every year at the very, very large BCBA conference, which is called the Association for Behavior Analysis International Conference. It just finished. It's always on Memorial Day weekend, and so the first talk was this year, because there's now an endowment that funds medical doctors, physicians who are also scientists, and each year they will come and give a presentation about the biology and the etiology of autism, and kind of help our BCBAs understand a little bit more of how kind of the biochemistry of an individual can interact with all the symptoms that we see, that we work on and that we treat as behaviorists. So the first talk was done by Dr. Richard Fry, MD, PhD, and it was a wonderful, wonderful talk. And we'll see who we select next year, but every year there will be a medical doctor who will be explaining all of everything that we've learned about the biology of autism. Now, quickly answering the question that was brought up. So there was a little bit of a misunderstanding, I think, there. So the redox cycle has to do with detoxifying from all the toxins in our environment. When we are not able to detoxify as fast as we are exposed to toxins, then our entire existence becomes a little bit too overloaded with toxicity. That toxicity overload affects people in different ways. The primary way that it affects us is that our body continues to work to detoxify, and therefore it strains the immune system. And that's very, very important, because toxicity, and when we're not able to detoxify, causes inflammation all over the body. And that inflammation, especially when it's in the gastrointestinal tract, will very seriously prevent the immune system from working the way that it should, because most of our immune functioning is in the gastrointestinal tract. It'll, of course, cause other issues as well. And as we know, many of our children struggle with GI inflammation, gastrointestinal inflammation, right? They have a lot of issues with diarrhea and constipation, and of course, a lot of pain that goes along with that. And then if you can imagine that, everything that we eat has to go through a functioning gastrointestinal tract for its nutritional value to reach all the different parts of the body and the brain, right? If we're not digesting food properly, then of course all the nutrients are not being received and processed the way that they're intended to be. So it's a pretty complicated process that our children go through, and that is how redox affects us. Now, I think what I was perhaps also referring to was that depending on the age that we are most overloaded with toxins, different aspects of brain functioning will be affected, right? So if it's very, very early in the life of an infant where they are overloaded with toxins, then obviously the brain development for prior to the age of 1 is very, very different than brain development, let's say, at the age of 5, right? So the growth of nerve cells, neurons, axons, dendrites, all the parts of the nerve cells is going to be affected, and it depends on where in the aging of an individual the most toxicity occurs. It's a little complicated, but hopefully that was an adequate explanation. Now, the question, Shannon, was kind of interesting because I guess the portion that the individual asked about was hyperbaric chambers. I'm not quite sure how the connection was made to hyperbaric chamber, but I do want to say in their thinking, but I do want to say that there was a time, I'd say, when was that? About maybe 15 years ago. I mean, time goes by so fast now, 10 or 15 years ago, where hyperbaric chambers were very popular. And the concept, theoretically, the concept was kind of interesting because the idea was that with a hyperbaric chamber, inflammation in the GI tract could be reduced. And if inflammation was reduced, then this might result in processing of food in a better way. There were also, parents were paying tons and tons of money to go through hyperbaric dives. That's how they're called. So, and I was hearing from families that they really felt there was a significant change in their children, some families. So at CARD, we decided to run 2 studies, which I have to say were extremely expensive. I'm very glad that we were able at that time to afford this and do this study. We actually got 20 hyperbaric chambers across our sites. We did 2 sets of studies, to be honest with you. We did one in our Texas site where we looked at individuals one by one very, very carefully. And we did another study in California where we had 20 chambers across our clinics. And we had children taking the recommended dosage of dives, in other words, going into the chamber and receiving hyperbaric oxygen. And for, I don't remember the duration, but whatever the recommended duration was, which I think was something like 40 hours, 30 hours, I honestly don't remember now. But we did what was recommended by the physicians who were recommending HBOT treatment, hyperbaric oxygen treatment. And we had control groups who actually went into the chamber, and the chamber was inflated, but no oxygen or pressure was given. And then we had the experimental group where children actually went in and received the appropriate amount of oxygen. And I have to say, I went into it being hopeful because there were parents saying that this is something effective for their children. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, we found absolutely no difference between the children who had received the HBART treatment and those who had not. In fact, we measured across so many different areas, like I can't even tell you, everything from memory to attention to speech to social behavior. I mean, we measured everything before and after, and there was absolutely no change. There was a change because we had our therapists also going in with the children to keep them occupied for the duration of, I think it was 30-minute sessions. And the only change that was evident was some of the therapists reported their own skin had improved. Now, hyperbaric oxygen is actually very good for acne and that type of thing. So that was the only finding. And so we published both of those studies, and several of the medical conferences who were at that time promoting hyperbaric oxygen stopped promoting it. And in fact, the company that sold those chambers was not very happy with us, but we were, ethical and published our results. So I do not want anyone out there to think, and things may have changed, I don't know. This was, as I said, more than 10 years ago, but at least from our own findings, hyperbaric oxygen did not have any kind of improvement on the symptoms of autism.
Can I tell you one of the questions that has come up since then and get your reaction to it was that those, correct me if I'm wrong on any of the assumptions, this is just what somebody brought up to me. When CARD did that study, you were using the soft shell HBOT tanks, which is what most of the parents were being sold, which were pretty expensive.
That's
but
correct.
That they were the soft shell, and that I've heard from at least one HBOT person who said, but I wish they'd done it in the hard tank, which those are places that you can only get at a facility. It's way too cost prohibitive for the average person to afford one of those. And like hospitals have hard shell. And what I was told was that gives a different level of HBOT. So they always wanted me to be clear that it was the soft shell that you guys found. Is that accurate, though, from your perspective?
No, that's absolutely correct. And those are the things that are very important. So the soft shells, the reason we used the soft shells were because that was the primary source of hyperbaric oxygen being given in those days. And yes, you're right. I mean, like, there were so many parents at that point, Shannon, who would put a second mortgage on their house so they could afford to purchase a soft shell. These soft shell chambers, which I still actually have one, cost around $20,000, and people were doing everything they could to get one in their own home and use it. And that's why we did it, because it was really kind of, people were under the impression that this is going to be a miracle cure for their child. And I was hopeful that it would, if anything, help the child attend better, and therefore would improve our ability to teach the child. Those soft shells, they provide 23% more compressed oxygen. The hard shells are 100% more compressed oxygen. And so there is an absolute difference in the two. The hard shells are several $100,000, and they're only as you said, hospitals or centers that were, because you have to understand that the whole concept of HBOT is because of divers. When divers come up from deep water too fast, they can have what's called the bends, which means that an oxygen bubble can actually go to their brain and kill them. And so when this is happening, divers will often be put in one of those hard shell chambers in order to eliminate the bubble, right? So those are in very specific locations where there's like diving hospitals, those types of things. And there are still hyperbaric centers, I guess. I know there's one in Orange County. There are a lot of centers and people still do take their children there. And there's no harm in it. I mean, the cost of it is a little bit difficult for people, but oxygen, it's not going to harm you to receive oxygen, obviously. And the concept of receiving a lot of oxygen early on, it will help improve growth of nerve cells. No question, oxygen is good for us. So those types of things are absolutely positive, but it isn't. A lot of the claims that were being made then were that, you go in a soft chill and you do 30 dives, or I think 30, 60 dives, something like that. And, you've lost all the symptoms of autism. And that just wasn't true.
Right. There we go. Now, earlier I said that you work with a wide variety of individuals on the spectrum, and John wrote it and said, do you also, is it for adults who are high functioning as well?
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, we currently have a lot of adults that we work with who are high functioning. And the way that our program works is that we basically will individualize the program. So it's not like specifically focused on one thing or another. We will do some activities or groups that are meant for groups of individuals, but you'll have a high functioning adult who'll come in and say, I really want help with figuring out how to date someone. And then you'll have another adult whose main issue is, I'm having a hard time in college because I can't really organize myself or regulate my schedule. Or you'll have another high functioning adult who will say, I still have a really hard time with work, and I don't know how to interact with my colleagues. So everyone has different issues, and we have a system at CARD that we built over the years. It's our second skills platform. Our first skills platform is for children, and the second one is Skills Living, which is for adults. And it is really focused on things like this. It's focused on an assessment. It starts with an assessment. It has to do with kind of figuring out where you need help. What are the areas that the individual needs help? Now, and remember, with adults, I mean, you have the entire spectrum. So you can have an adult who is extremely affected by autism and cannot communicate, is extremely frustrated, and therefore has become aggressive or self-injurious and just extremely disturbed. And so that individual will need a lot of different types of help and support. So that individual might need help with functional communication, learning how to communicate using an iPad, learning how to express their needs, learning how to, make food for themselves, like basic skills. Whereas a high functioning adult, as I said, might have completely different issues. And so all of those are things that we help and work with.
And since you brought that up, I'm going to give our skills and IBT update for today. Skills and IBT. IBT stands for the Institute for Behavioral Training. These are really useful tools that are useful in a lot of different directions, like that Skills Living curriculum program that Dr. Grant-Pichet was just talking about. And each week in the pandemic, during COVID, they've been offering free things to our audience to help them to be able to do the things that they want to be able to do. So this week, for ABA parents and guardians, they're offering a free IBT, Institute for Behavioral Training, e-learning that is specifically for parents and caregivers. It's called Parent Useful Strategies for the Home. And I love this because even if you were going back to school for a while, now it's summer and everybody needs some help at home. How do you set up the home to work efficiently and effectively? It's a great e-learning, and it's free to you right now. I'm going to give you a phone number in just a second. For teachers who are now enjoying, I hope, a summer break, they're offering the e-learning educator module, Behavior Management. What a great thing to do over the summer when you're not dealing with this, because I'm a former teacher, and we all know if you don't have the behavior under control, then you're going to have a hard time getting to the teaching. And this behavior management course helps not only with autism, but with anybody that's having a behavior issue and how to deal with it in a positive way. That's free to educators right now. Get your pencils ready. I'm going to give you a phone number in just a second. They are also continuing to offer their RBT, which stands for Registered Behavior Technician 2.0 training course. That's free to a parent or caregiver on a case-by-case basis. That's a 40-hour e-learning program so that you would learn all of the things that a beginning therapist learns. It is the first step towards becoming a registered behavior technician to take that course. It's really great. And then also they're offering a 10% discount on any skills products. So that includes the skills curriculum, or if you were interested in that skills living that Dr. Grant-Pichet was talking about, which is for individuals that are 14 and up. I think you can start to transition at 12. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Grant-Pichet. And then the phone number for all of these free things, 877-975-4559. Again, 877-975-4559. That gets you through to skills, and you can tell them that you saw this on Autism Live. You can use my name if you want to. You can say you want the Friends and Family program. All of that is available to you to help you with what you need to know. I don't know how much longer they're going to be offering the free pandemic as the world opens back up. This was specifically during COVID. So if you were thinking about taking that RBT course, that's a $440 value, you guys, which is crazy to begin with, because what you learn in it is worth way more than $440. But if you are like, I want to know what these ABA people know, I want to be a more effective caregiver, BCBA, whatever, the BCBAs have already done that. That's silly. But it's really great. It helped me so very much. So call that number and get hooked up with that, because I don't know how much longer it is. Okay, so we've got some questions live. Did you want to add anything to that, Dr. Grant-Pichet? I just talked all over you.
No, that was perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a question. We have somebody who was recently diagnosed as an adult in 2019 as high functioning. They also have a diagnosis of ADHD. It would be beneficial throughout my life to have more compassionate people to work with me than harsh people, especially in today's world. And I would particularly like to participate in a seminar on educating people about experiences I've gone through and my current situation. I don't know if there's a question in there, but I think we all could stand for more compassion. Go ahead, Dr. Grant.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll say that probably holds true for all of us. And we all kind of feel like there would be, more room in the world for compassion. But I do also want to say that things have improved quite a bit. There is more compassion in the world. If you go back and think about the fact that there, many years ago, and we're not talking about just disability, compassion towards disabilities, but we're talking about race and gender and all these types of things. And I think the world in general, or at least living in the United States, has changed quite significantly over the past 20 years or so, and there is a lot more understanding and acceptance of all of those things. I never thought that, being someone who's been in the world of autism for over 40 years, as Shannon said, it was viewed extremely differently 40 years ago than it is now. And there's a great deal of wanting to understand more. This year alone, I did presentations for two very large companies, Oracle and Surgical Care Affiliates, where all they wanted was to learn how to better accommodate their employees who are on the spectrum. So the world has changed, and there's a great deal of compassion coming, and people are very, very interested in learning more. We still have a long way to go, but things have improved. I do want to say on the other side of it is also that, and I don't have the experience of how people can be not understanding, or as you say, harsh towards you because of a diagnosis you might carry. But I do, being a woman, being from the Middle East, I can understand that there are situations where we feel people might be too harsh towards us or might judge us in a different light. And in those cases, I always try to, maybe this is just the psychologist in me, but I hope that it will help the individual who's written in as well. I think in those cases, it's always best to try to understand the world from the perspective of the person who's being harsh. People are all kind of born with the same level of compassion and love. Something happens along the way in our lives that makes us judgmental or makes us have less of compassion, or makes us be less patient, let's put it that way, or more fearful of others who are different. And it's a little bit, I think that's where we all have to focus when we feel someone is harsh towards us. You have to just try to figure out what could have happened to them that they're so afraid of the fact that I'm a little different. That might be helpful.
Yes, because it goes both ways, and often we find that the person who is being the loudest and mean to people is somebody who was bullied before. It doesn't excuse it, but if what we ultimately want to do is make it better, that's a part of what we need to know. Thank you so much for that. Vanessa has written in and said, my son is being denied his NROTC full scholarship. He's very accomplished and has overcome challenges and no longer meets the criteria for ASD, and we need help. She goes on to mention that he's actually been a guest on the show before, and so it's lovely to have you back with us. I don't know what you want to say, Dr. Granpeesheh, but if you wanted, I don't know what the requirements are for the NROTC full scholarship, but if you wanted to write specifically to me, I can certainly look into it, s.penrod@autism-live.com. But I wanted Dr. Granpeesheh to talk about the fact that, sometimes our kiddos, as they, make progress and become teens and adults, sometimes it's a known phenomenon that they get to the point where they've made so much progress that they no longer qualify for an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. And then things change. I mean, and what they have access to, they're in sort of that in-between place, Dr. Granpeesheh, where I still believe, like, I'm just looking at my son. My son's brain functions differently than mine does. But it no longer functions in a way that's different, that could be counted as a disability. But it functions differently than mine. But, there are things that he had access to before that he doesn't have access to because he doesn't have a disability. But I think a lot of times people don't know that that's a possibility. And I think because it's not well known, there aren't enough services to help a family negotiate for how do you go from having a child that's deemed disabled to having a child that functions differently but is not disabled. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Absolutely. And I have to say that I always, when I see new parents, I always tell them that, don't worry or be scared of the diagnosis, because the main reason for the diagnosis is to access certain aspects of funding, including health insurance funding, right? And so you have certain needs, and they are, I guess, severe enough to classify for a diagnosis. And that's really important to differentiate, because I'll use a different example other than ASD. So let's talk about something like, let's say, anxiety. The majority of us have anxiety over one thing or another, right? You can't really, there are very, very few people who could truthfully say, I've never had anxiety. I don't get anxious about anything. We all experience a certain amount of anxiety. The difference between the level of anxiety that most of us experience and the individual whose diagnosis is something like generalized anxiety disorder is a lot. There's a big difference, right? And the main difference, first of all, for anything to be classified as a disorder, it has to be severe enough that it interferes with functioning in two environments. Usually that is If it's a child, it would be at home and school. If it's an adult, it would be at home and at work. So, I've used a pretty crass example in the past where I've said, you can have someone who drinks a full bottle of scotch every day, but they are, wonderful to their family and loved by their children and their wife, and they go to work and they're fully functional. They just have a 2-hour period of blackout every day or whatever it is. It does not function as enough of a symptom or series of symptoms to classify under a disorder. It just doesn't. Same thing with anxiety, same thing with ASD. So many of us will have some of the features of ASD. For instance, some of us might really love to have order in our universe, right? We want things in a particular order. Many of us get very upset if transitions occur without us being aware. Many of us are sensitive to, I know I am, like when I have had a very tough day or a long day, and I'm sitting in an environment where there's multiple sources of noise, like TV on and my kids are talking and there's background music or whatever, I can't handle it. My brain starts to just shut down and I need to like leave the room and calm myself, right? But these are at a different level than individuals experience who are actually given the diagnosis of ASD. There are many language delays and language disorders or inabilities, but it's not the same as having the level of language disability that is in autism, in ASD. For an individual to classify for diagnosis, they have to have specific number of symptoms within specific subcategories of behavior. So, okay, now you have those and you get the diagnosis and you benefit from the funding that exists. And if you do the right thing and if you receive therapies and treatments and you work really, really hard for many years, you're going to lose some or most of those symptoms. That's the whole goal of therapy, is to get rid of those issues or to make them mild enough that they're manageable. And once you hit that level, yes, your diagnosis is no longer applicable. It will not apply. Someone will remove that diagnosis. And then it becomes tough, as Shannon said, because there are certain aspects of life, maybe funding, maybe other things, that you were previously had access to, and you no longer have access to those things, and it becomes like almost feels unfair. Why do I not have access to those things anymore? And Shannon is right. There isn't, unfortunately, sometimes you still have that need. Shannon, you know what this reminds me of is years ago, before there was health insurance coverage, a lot of our patients would receive funding from regional centers in California. Regional centers are the Department of Developmental Services, and they would provide funding for support. And it was very unfortunate because if you went from having a diagnosis of ASD or autism, this autistic disorder is what it was called in those days, and your symptoms became mild enough that your diagnosis changed to either Asperger's or pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, PDD-NOS, which was kind of like the more higher functioning version of ASD, then you no longer qualified for regional center funding. It was exactly the same process here, and we would always have to be very cautious because we felt that our children needed support, just not as much support perhaps. And so the funding system wasn't set up appropriately. I can see the same thing happening here. It almost feels unfair to lose access to certain types of grants or scholarships or funds or so on. And perhaps in this particular case, it was something completely wrong. We don't know the details here. But what I do
some more just now, and she said, we're not seeking funding or services, but he's wanting to serve his country.
Unbelievable.
So,
amazing.
Yeah.
And that just makes no sense to me. And I hope that they do write into you, Shannon, and that we can figure out how we can help them.
I will tell you that the current policy with our armed services is that if you had a diagnosis of autism, that there is a process that you can appeal, but they will not admit you. And the United States government and their armed forces do not recognize that you could have the diagnosis and then no longer qualify for it as a disorder. They don't recognize that. But I do know personally people who have been able to get past it with a petition, and there's a process. So please write to me, and I potentially can hook you up with somebody that you can talk to whose son went through it and is now serving in the Marine Corps.
And how amazing that your son actually wants to serve his country, and what an unfortunate situation that they're not allowing him to. I think this scenario kind of falls under the, unfortunately, all I guess mental disorders, like autism falls into a book that's called a Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So I was just looking because I think mine is somewhere in this office, but
Doorstop.
exactly. The DSM, or Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, I think the military has always taken the position that if you are struggling with something that is of mental health concern, the DSM-5 exactly, and 4 and 3, all of them, the concern is basically that we don't want to put you in a situation that might make that worse. And so, with veterans especially, the primary mental issue is PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. And so in order to make sure that they don't begin, a lot of mental disorders become worse with stress. I mean, we all know that, right? Like when you have stress, your anxiety increases. When you have stress, your depression increases. When you have stress, your sleep disorder gets worse. All those types of things. And I think the military is not understanding that although autism is in this book, it's a very different thing. And once you have, gotten to a point where you no longer qualify for this diagnosis, you are probably not just as strong as everyone else mentally. You're probably actually quite stronger, to be honest. Like when I see with our children who recover, their resilience, their ability, their patience, their understanding, their all of their mental capabilities end up being quite strong, if not the same as their peers, even stronger.
Absolutely, I agree. That's what I see. And they said, thank you so much. She wants to know, is it discrimination?
Honestly, I don't know. I wouldn't know. I just don't know enough about that.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I know that there's a way around it. And I think that that's the thing to focus on if that's truly what he wants to do. So do write to me, s.penrod@autism-live.com. And let me see if I can't hook you up to some help. I want to say hello to Renee and Elvira and say thank you so much for being here. They want to know, is an ABA center better than home? They're trying to get their son into a center, but it's a 50-mile drive. And they further go on to say they live in a rural area. So in-home services, while they would be great, they're a struggle because they're having a hard time hiring behavior technicians to come that far. So
yes, I understand. So yes, Elvira, or Renee and Elvira, we did a study a few years ago where we contrasted rate of learning in our centers to those in homes. And because, all of ABA used to be in home. And so we wanted to make sure we're in the right environment. And all of our centers at that point, we had over 100 clinics. They were all set up in a sense that all our kids were getting therapy at home. We then, the study was actually kind of surprising, the results. And the results showed that there was twice as much learning going on at the centers. Now, we can go back, and we never did a follow-up to differentiate what's called a factor analysis and figure out exactly why. But we hypothesize that some of the reasons were that the centers were, the supervisors are present, the BCBAs are present at the centers, so all the behavior technicians are on their best behavior and they're not doing anything wrong, because if they do something wrong, then the supervisor kind of catches it. That's one reason. And I think also at home, there's a lot more distraction, right? Like the gardener is outside and the child gets distracted. The dog barks and the child gets that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit less of a distraction when they're at the center. Now, that being said, you can absolutely produce a very effective environment at home where there's fewer distractions, and you want to make sure that the therapists who are working with the child are very diligent and hardworking, and they don't muck around and waste time, but they're very focused. And you can connect with a BCBA who can, these days, it's so easy to have a camera in the corner of the room and just drop in and view the session. I mean, we do a lot of our supervision now through Zoom. So it's possible for our supervisors to see what's going on at all times. So that kind of thing is absolutely, it is possible for you to set up and make sure that your area, your child is receiving really high quality therapy at home. It is very hard right now to find therapists. I advise families who are in rural areas to look at high school grads, people who are just coming out of high school. This is the perfect time, right? Because kids are graduating and they're looking for jobs. And then to go on our other company, which is the IBT website that Shannon mentioned, Institute for Behavioral Intervention. And if you are able to go there, then you can get this individual that you hired to be fully trained. They just look at videos and there's supervision that's provided, and they learn all of this. Now, in the meantime, hopefully you have contact with a BCBA who can also guide them and help them and mentor them. But it is absolutely possible to set up a home program. Many of our families have successfully done that, and their children have done incredibly well.
Yes, absolutely. We got a lot of questions coming in. It always happens towards the end of the hour. Purple Lover says, hi, my son has a large vocabulary and his receptive language is really good. Understands almost everything we say, but he doesn't use those words.
Okay. So that's a really great question, and it is very, very important. So you have to work on expressive language, and you've picked up on a very vital factor, which is that our children sometimes don't use their expressive language, maybe because it's too hard, in which case that means that they possibly have apraxia of the tongue, which essentially means that they would need a lot of practice with a speech therapist. And you can help them as well with exercises that will get them to move their tongue and mouth muscles and develop muscle tone in their mouth and tongue. I mean, look at how, when you talk, just pay attention to the thousands of ways that your tongue, your mouth, and your lips move in order to produce the words that we say. It's a lot of coordination and movement, and it's pretty rapid. And sometimes our children have apraxia. Their muscle tone is low in their mouth and tongue. And it's hard for them to make those sounds and to do the movements. And they have to start practicing it in a very conscious way before it becomes fluent and before they can just do it automatically. So that might be a reason. Another reason might be, as you said, they're not motivated. Which could just be because you, as a very good parent, probably are good at predicting the things they want. And if that's the case, you need to hold back on giving things to the individual unless they use their voice and their words. It's hard. As parents, it's very, very hard for us, but it is the number one, I guess, protocol that we use to motivate our children to actually use their words. It's called manding, teaching manding. Manding is when the child uses words to request things, right? So you need to basically hold off on giving things unless the child uses their words. That's the first one. And then you need to, require descriptive language. I mean, there's a series of requirements that become a little bit harder and harder so that the individual is motivated to use their words, and they only receive reinforcers if they use their words.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, when you talk about it, if you haven't seen it, it's very hard to picture. But the example I always like to give is that when they were trying to get my son to start making sounds, they started with like $1 worth of bubbles. And what they do is they take and they blow the bubbles, and the kids play with the bubbles, and they're all happy, and they do this over and over and over again. And then the therapist starts, they'll hold up the thing and they'll go bubbles, and then they blow, right? And they do this over and over and over again. And what they did with my son is at a certain point after this was like a pattern. He knew she was going to say bubbles, and then there were going to be bubbles. But then she paused and she went, and his lips started to move in the position because he knew it had to happen before the bubbles were going to happen. So eventually they got him to say and they would blow the bubbles. And then they got him to say and they would blow. Start out going, oh, I'm taking the bubbles away from you and you can't have them until you say bubbles. It's not like that. They shape it up so that they get a reinforcer, and they always keep it within the realm of what they can do. It's really a beautiful, elegant dance to watch them teach our kids to do it. There's nothing about it that is harmful to the kids. They thoroughly enjoy it and they get there. It's just amazing to watch. So I just wanted to put that in because people think, oh, you're taking something away from the child. It's not like that at all.
No.
So super fun. Okay. On to Rondonia says, my difficulty is knowing what my child's supposed to know at his age. They want to know what skills. He's 3 years old. He's great in alphabets and numbers. He can do that in Portuguese and English, but he doesn't know how to cut papers, etc.
That's great. So, and it's funny because they're asking what skills, and I kind of read that as what is skills, and
Yes.
skills is the answer to what you're asking right now. So many years ago, I agree with you, Rondulia. My question was also, our children are able to do so many things, but yet they are different from what their peers do, right? So they might be stronger in certain things, like letters and numbers are a great example. Like most 3-year-olds don't know letters and numbers, right? So they know so much more. But on the other hand, they don't do basic things that, let's say, a 3-year-old would do, like cutting paper. So how do I kind of produce a program that helps my child catch up with the norm? Well, I have to figure out what are the things that are age appropriate that my child is doing, and what are the things that they're falling behind on. Okay. So that's when I started to develop and write the skills program. And so what we did is first we started listing, and skills is what Shannon had talked about before. The website is up on the screen. It's www.skillsforautism.com. It's a big platform. What we first did is we listed every lesson that we ever thought of teaching any of our children. So it's thousands of lessons, and everything from what we just talked about, manding. How do you teach a child to talk? How do you teach a child to imitate? How do you teach them to ask for things, or to label things in their environment, or talk about what just happened at school? Everything, right? And then after we listed it, I realized that, oh my God, it's like thousands of lessons. So every parent is going to come and say, what do I teach? Do I have to teach all of these things? Or what are the ones that are more relevant to my child? Like, what does my child need? So then I realized what is even more important than what we need is an assessment. right? So that every child could be assessed. And so then we went into this massive multi-year project where we wrote questions that are for the parent to answer. And then after we wrote all these questions, so the questions would be, can your child request things? Can your child identify colors? Can your child cut with scissors? Whatever it is. Thousands of questions having to do with all those lessons. And then I realized, well, we need to make sure that whenever we ask the question and the parent says no, maybe it's age appropriate that they don't know. So let's say if I'm asking a parent of a 2-year-old, can your child use scissors to cut papers? I actually want the parent to say no, because no other 2-year-old is using using scissors, right? It's not something I want to teach yet. Instead, I want to teach that 2-year-old maybe toilet training, which should probably be a little bit more important at that stage, right? Or language, or whatever it is, social greetings, or whatever it is. So what we did is we then went back and age normed every single skill. So what we have now in skills is everything that a child does, everything across the following domains, and it's a lot, guys. It's all language, cognitive skills, executive functioning skills, so planning, etc., play skills, social skills, motor, that would include gross and fine motor, adaptive, so things like taking care of themselves, brushing their teeth, etc., and academic. And academic is where it might even actually be under both academic and under fine motor, using scissors, for instance, to cut paper. So, and then we classified all those things under these headings, and we age normed them. So we put them in the appropriate order of typical development. So when you have let's say, 3-year-old, you're only going to be focusing on things that are appropriate for typically developing 3-year-olds. Not for, let's say, something that is a 5-year skill, right? I'm not going to take a 2-year-old, let's say, and teach them how to tie their shoes yet. I'm more focused on teaching the 2-year-old how to request things they want, those types of things. And it's across all those domains. So what you should do, Rantonia, is go on Skills, get a membership for just even a month, get on there, and it's not that expensive, Shannon. I don't know what it is now. It used to be like $70, I think, a month,
Yes.
or something like that.
But you'll say that you saw it on Autism Live and get a 10% discount.
And you go in there and you answer these hundreds of questions about your child. In fact, I think depending on the age of the child, obviously it's fewer questions, but if it's like an 8-year-old, it's like 20 hours worth of questions. It's a lot of questions. And you can leave and come back, but you answer these questions, and the questions are just, can your child do something, right? Yes or no. You say no, that entire skill will go into your child's kind of supermarket. And then later, when you've answered the whole thing, you can go back and look, and it'll tell you exactly what you're asking, Randunia, which is, in the area of language, all of these things have to be taught. In the area of motor, all of these things are behind age. In the area of social, all of these things. And so you'll see the entire thing that your child needs. And now you can go back and select, and the way that I would do it is I would select the younger skills first. So if your child is 3 and there are skills that he or she should have mastered or should have been demonstrating at typical development age 2, I teach those skills first. I teach all the 2-year skills. And that way you're catching up your child. Then you go on and you teach the 3-year skills. And then you keep going with it until your child just catches up. And that's basically how you do it. And that's all of our supervisors at CARD follow this platform called Skills.
It's amazing. I've always said when you go to the mall, there's a map and it says you are here, and then you can chart your course. And I always wanted to know where was the thing for autism. And that is just one of the like million things that Skills does, is if you do the assessment and give that investment in your child's education, and it is an investment of your time too, you will have a snapshot that shows you all these things that your child can do, and it shows you where the norm is, where your child is. And sometimes your child will be above the norm, sometimes below. It's really wonderful. So again, Traven, they're also asking for the IBT number. So let's give them all those websites really quickly because we're out of time. Because Renee and Elvira have said that they think they're going to try the Card Center and they want to get trained. And what's the training called? That's the Institute for Behavioral Training. There's their website, www.IBehavioralTraining.com. And then Skills is sort of the companion and the curriculum that we were talking about to do the assessment. And you've got the website there for Skills, but let me give you the phone number that you need to get the discount, which is the single most important thing, right? 87, if you're going to get it, why not get it cheaper? 877-975-4559. 877-975-4559. Vanessa, I see that you've already emailed me. Thank you so much. Okay. So all of that being said, we'll be back next week, and it's such a thrill with Ask Dr. Doreen. Tomorrow, I'm back, and Bonnie Yates is here, special education attorney. We've got jargon of the day. I'm also going to give my update. I actually went to Disneyland in COVID and have some updates about what that is like when you have kiddos on the spectrum. I'll be talking about that tomorrow. But Dr. Grant-Pichet, we thank you so much for your time. And keep on, you guys are doing such a great job. Keep on trekking. We will be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks for watching Autism Live. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.